And the reason I'm going to leave out some of the details is because the really good information is in print, and it's in Ford books, and it's in manuals for mechanics and proven information. You can get a good lead as to where to head to on that from some people say, well, I ran into this one time and I had to change and do this and this and this and this. So we're going to work on that. In the meantime, old Socks back here in the background up on the shelf is going to keep an eye on me, make sure I do right, and I get this all put together, and I'm going to put on some blues, and I'm going to clean some parts up and pile them all up here, and I'll get back to you and show you where I'm at. This is going to add some time to this video, but this is something I need to be careful about because I can make a wrong turn and end up driving an extra 75 miles to get where I'm going 10 miles away.
Okay, just a little quick break, give us a little bit of entertainment reality. This is inside of my storage building. I've got some parts that have been given to me, a lot that have been given to me, and ones that I've purchased engines and taken them all apart. But I'll tell you what I do. When I take something apart, I label it and I put it in a box. That's a 5.0 that came from Hawkins Salvage Yard. I remember which motor that was. And that's a 351 Cleveland, came from a fellow that sold me a bunch of stuff. I've got all those parts. Well, up here on the top shelf, I have got, I don't trip and fall on everything, that's the upper intake manifold off that Explorer. And I started looking and I pulled off part of the pulley system for it too. Look at that big piece of thing, stuff, whatever that is, with some kind of non-moving idler pulley. I'll bet that thing had a belt on it a mile long. And I've got the oil antifreeze mix cooler idea they had on there. And I've got the upper plenum for the Explorer too. That's the good intake that everybody wants. Well, this stuff I set aside. I'm not a fan of fuel injection, but let me explain a little. This might be good to somebody someday, but I was able to come up here and find the pulley system. And I know that this pulley and this depth and then the water pump and everything, that I don't want to deal with that. I'm not going to go down that road. I'm also not going to use this cooler for the oil because I'm using a bigger oil pan, and that's going to do what I want. It's going to fit in the car. So I'm going to gather up off this shelf over here. I took down the off the nail, I took down 4 or 5 different covers. I'm going to come up with a cover that's the right depth and a plate and everything else and put it all together and see if I can't make a regular serpentine belt system like I usually do that is really simple. I'm not going to run AC on this car or a bunch of idler pulleys. I'm going to run one tensioner pulley and power steering and an alternator. That's it. Water pump. I went to this box here. I remember the kid that gave this to me. Nick's 5.0, and it was a truck code 5.0, which means it didn't have that shallow Cobra Mustang Explorer pulley water pump setup on it. It had the one I'm looking for. Well, I looked in there and I didn't find exactly what I was looking for, but you know what I did find? Look at that. I found a flywheel, and it's a 50-ounce balance, so I'm going to be running shy on those. I got to have one for an automatic, and I didn't have one. Perhaps. We'll see. But it's tagged and labeled. And I also got into this 5.0 Hawkins box I showed you. And this is what I typically do when I take an engine apart. Look what I put in there. Pistons, rods, pulleys, balancer. There's my 50-ounce balancer. I want to use a simple one right there. Look at that. That's going to be the balancer I probably use. My pulleys. And I got some brackets in here too. I got engine mounts. I got some brackets. I got some rails for a oil pan. So all these goodies here, eventually I can clean all this up, steal out what I need, and throw the rest away for scrap when I get to it. But this is a good source of stuff right here. This box got some of the stuff I need. I might not have all of it, but I think today I'm going to find almost everything I need, if not all of the brackets and everything to put the pulley system on this engine. Okay, in my travels today, very briefly, I found a couple of different flywheels. One thing that needs to be remembered is that 5.0 has its own weight balance. It's 50 ounce. That means the weight on the flywheel and the weight on the balancer on the front of the engine are different. Now, if you confuse those and get the wrong one on, your engine is going to vibrate horribly, and you'll wonder what went wrong with your build. It's hard to tell just by the size of the weight. The up there is hanging a 351 Windsor, which is a 28 ounce imbalance, and a 50 ounce in front of it, but the weights are the same size. One of them's got some holes drilled in it and stuff. It's hard to guess, but there's numbers on them. Ford numbers everything. Check the numbers, look them up. Also, Ford used a big one and a small one, especially in their older manual stuff. You can get a 164 tooth or 157 tooth flywheel. One is a larger diameter and one has a larger clutch with it, a 12-inch clutch. One has a, I think it's a 10.5 or 11-inch clutch. Anyway, be careful with that stuff. You don't mix that up. Make sure you get the right one, especially if you're going to the junkyard hunting them down and paying for them. This right here is labeled 351 Windsor. Came off 351 Windsor. That's a balancer. I'm going to put that on the shelf, make sure that doesn't find its way in the garage, because I'm working on a 5.0, which has a 50 ounce imbalance. Ford engines, I'm going to put it right there on the shelf along with the water pump that goes with it and leave it be. Ford engines have different balances, but the 5.0 is the one that's unique in having a 50 ounce imbalance. And sometimes that can be a real problem for some people when you get them put together and wonder what went wrong just because you changed a little bit of something. And it's something to be careful of. Okay, this is what I found to work with. I also found some extra goodies, an alternator and some other stuff to look at and compare in a bracket. I'm hoping I can find most of what I need in here. But you know what? I'm afraid I'm going to have to buy some stuff. I may be short some things I have to have. And that's kind of sad on our budget bill. It's going to add a little cost I wasn't expecting. Here's a moment we're going to vary outside of budget. I run the numbers on this. E4TE-A3A. And you know what? I think they went with that block I'm using. E4TE gives a year designation. It's 84. TE is truck designation or non-Mustang high performance. It could be a Lincoln, it could be a lot of other motors, but anyway, that's what that is. And then A3A is a designation that in the code gives you what it is. It's supposed to be a 50 ounce weight imbalance, okay? And that's what this one's made like. You'll notice that there's a rubber ring right here. This part is pressed onto this part with a rubber ring in between, okay? And this is a pretty good balancer, but I start looking at some stuff, and there's a ring right here I'm going to have to sand out. That's where the seal rides, and I don't want the seal to fail. I don't want no leaks, so that's one consideration. Another consideration is that rubber ring. Now, you can put them in a lathe or put them on the engine and start watching them and see if they start to wobble while they're running. But sometimes this part can slide on this part and rotate on that rubber, and your timing marks will be off and stuff. They get pretty bad before that happens, and eventually they could fail. I don't know that I'm not going to maybe turn just for shits and giggles this engine up to 6,000 RPM a time or two. And I started looking online, and guess what? I could buy a brand new all steel with no rubber ring manufactured balancer for about 60 bucks. So I think I'm going to call my buddies at Summit and see what I can do for that. That might be a better choice for me. Even though this is a budget build, I could opt to put this on this engine, and the frilly frally, and it might be okay. I certainly am not going to put it on this engine here. I'm going to put an all-metal one on that one. But I think I'm going to consider maybe spending a little few dollars on this, make sure I get this right. And I just might buy me a new flywheel, too, because I need fresh new teeth on that starter. This car's going to run 100,000 miles, and I don't want to have to fool with it. So maybe I don't want to short myself on parts on those two items. Alright, I'm working on the puzzle here. Now look at this water pump that I'm going to use. And it's got a number inside of it, so I'm going to call Edelbrock and talk to them about it. And see the way the passages are made and the way the impeller's made. That's a high performance water pump. This is the original. This is also a reverse flow. You can tell by the way the blades are shaped that it turns clockwise, which is reverse flow. And then I look at this cover and the way it's made. And these two go together on the 96. It's a shallow setup. So I'm going to set that aside. That's not what I'm doing. This water pump appears to match on these ports. See the way they're flowing in on this one. When I set everything together and line it up and start looking at it, these chambers underneath appear that they want to flow in. The water wants to flow in and go through here with a pattern. It's going to go through that way real smooth and nice. Look at all these other covers I got that are V-belt, older ones. Let's look at those. These have got a different flow from a different direction. See the difference? One is a reverse flow, one is not a reverse flow. All these parts have got numbers. A D7AE is 87, I think, or 77. FE7 is 87 design. So I need to go through all the codes. Here's another one. Now they say that the ones that have the seal that press in from the back were V-belt, and the ones that press in with the seal from the front are the more modern ones that we're dealing with. However, here's one that presses in from the front, had a fuel pump, has the other kind of flow. We're really going to have to get down on the numbers and do some serious work on this, some serious research, make sure I get the right one, because I've heard it time and time again. This is where a lot of overheating comes from, especially sitting in traffic at an idle. Guys are like, man, my car overheats at an idle. When I get on the road, it's okay. I put a high flow water pump on it and everything. I think a lot of it has to do with this right here and the mate and the matchup of the parts. And so I'm going to be real careful on this. And I'm not above buying all new parts for this either if I have to, but I want to make sure that I use the right parts together and everything comes out groovy. Okay, so we got a picture here I'm just going to show you. You can see several things to think about it. I've been on the phone with Edelbrock, going to ask about their water pump and a compatibility with this cover. I'm going to double check and make sure all that looks good. It does look good, but I want to know if there needs to be a plate that goes in between. Some models have a plate, some models don't have a plate. And you might be asking yourself, what kind of a dang redneck mess is going on the workbench? That looks like a dang circus. Well, I'll explain it to you and tell you what I'm doing. And it makes good sense. And it only takes a little bit of time, and it makes everything so much more leak-proof. So I've been cleaning up the surface on this timing cover with my handy-dandy gasket scraper, and there's lots of different kinds. This is the one I use. And I sharpen it on my belt sander, but it's not exactly a really square, true edge when I do that. It is pretty sharp, but this is aluminum. I gotta be careful I don't gouge it and put a line in it while I'm doing it and make a big mess. So I need to do it gently. You can also get a razor blade scraper, which is real handy too, and you gotta hold that at the right angle and be gentle. You put a line in it, and a line means that oil or water can travel through that. So what I did is I cleaned it all up. I'm getting prepared. It's been washed in diesel or kerosene. And I'm getting prepared to finish these surfaces up because I'm going to put gaskets on them. And I got done scraping, and I wonder, is there any high spots or low spots? So look what I did. I'm fortunate enough that I have what's called a machinist table or a marble. That's one thing, but there's other things you can use too. One of them would be a piece of side glass out of a side window out of a Ford truck or some Chevy trucks. Out of a junkyard is invaluable. You can pick one up there, and if you put that piece of glass on your workbench on a towel or something, it sits really flat and true, and you can put sandpaper on it and use it. It's invaluable. Pick one up sometime. Keep it in your shop. That thick glass is handy. It's usable, and it's tempered. What I did was I laid a piece of sandpaper on here, and I took these parts, and I didn't have to do it real heavy. I just held the sandpaper with my finger, and I moved the part back and forth and around a little bit. I didn't really push down real hard to let the weight do it. But let me show you what I found. See where I'm starting to sand down a little bit? I find some low spots and some high spots. That's going to clean that up real nice, make that flat so it seals against the block. These get warped over time. They are also $179 if I want to buy a new one, which I do not. I don't want to buy a new one. So I'm working on this, and I'm going to sand this down a little bit flat. It's better not to take a file to it. You can do a cross file sometimes too, or lay some sandpaper on that. That's another method of doing it. Go in this direction and that direction, different directions. Make sure you stay level. But I really like the flat method on glass or on a marble or something smooth that you know to be a good flat surface. And look what I'm finding on my water pump. It's got some spots too. Now, a lot of people say, well, you just slap some RTV on there, put some of that on there, and put plenty on there, just goop it up and screw it down and get done and hurry up. You can if you want to, but I prefer not to. I like to drag things out and make a big long project out of them, make it hard on myself, and get it all done and feel like I did the very best I could. RTV gets inside of stuff you put too much in there, and it gets into the parts, it gets into the water pump, gets into the oil pump. I don't want a lot of that crap in my engine, but I do use a thin layer in between the paper gaskets, and it works great. Use it like it's intended. You can't just put JB Weld on the front of an engine, have it hold all the oil in. I had an engine I took apart a while back that had that done to it. Take the time to do it right.
use a thin layer of RTV. I really like using stuff called the Right Stuff Permatex, and we'll show that in a little bit when I get my oil pan on. I'm going to use a dry only oil pan, but I'm going to use a little bit of Right Stuff with it when I do it. And I'm going to do the same on my gaskets here for this. These are thin papers. We're going to put them together a certain way too. Hopefully I'm going to get a good seal. Not going to leak any water, because there ain't nothing worse on a Ford than that front timing cover leaking water. And the thing warms up, puts a puddle of water on top of it, and you're like, well, dang it. So we don't want no dang it, so we don't want no holy crap moments where we have a total failure. We're going to work it out right.
Okay, now because we're doing a budget build, I've got a small press over there I could have used, but I didn't. I wanted to show you. I used a piece of wood and a light hammer, which I like a broad one, a body hammer that I have in my toolbox, to put that seal in the front of that cover. I put it in multiple directions, got it started, and then hammered it down until it was flat. Tried to do it evenly without binding it and collapsing anything. Looks to be a good job. I can look on the back side and see. Make sure there's no air or light showing. Sometimes people put a little RTV on there too. Tell you what I am going to do, I'm going to grease this. And also in my gasket kit, I got lucky. In my gasket kit was a speedy sleeve. I may choose to use the speedy sleeve and use this balancer anyway and put a sleeve over that. It's called a repair sleeve. I'll put that over that and then make a new surface for that sealed right on. That might be just fine. That'll save me 70 bucks. I cleaned up and sanded with some crocus cloth and smoothed that surface all up. I put this on a wire brush on my grinder and cleaned up the timing marks so I can see them. I took that speedy sleeve, and it came with some red thread locker, and I coated around the outside of it, coated around the inside, and I set it on there very carefully. I had to make sure I was square. And I used this, you can see the marks where and I turned it while I did it. And I tried to smack it evenly so that it would go down straight and smooth. And this is going to ride inside that seal and give me a new surface to ride on there. I'm going to grease that really good before I put it in, or I'll burn that rubber and ruin that seal. I painted this, cleaned it up and painted it, and I painted it all exhaust black, except for right there. After I cleaned it on a wire brush, I painted that white. Now I'm going to take some sandpaper, and I'm going to go across it lightly and see if I can leave the grooves white and sand the rest off the top, and then I'll clear it.
Boy, did I strike out on that idea. It didn't sand very well. It didn't leave the white like I wanted. It made a mess. Maybe I tried to sand too soon. I just cleaned it back off on a wire brush, and I took a little paint touch-up kit that I've got, and I put 2 white lines on it. I put a full line at 0, and I put a half a line at 36 all in. 36 degrees before advance. That's the way I set my engines. That's the way I'm going to set this one when we're done. I'm going to set it with a timing light. And we're probably going to wind up with about 16 initial and stopped at 36 all in. And then we're going to throw vacuum on top of that for mileage and economy.
Okay, so I started thinking, between here and the gasket, there's supposed to be a steel plate that goes on, and then a gasket, and then a water pump goes on. I started looking, I thought, well, I don't have to have a gasket on this one. It fits without one. So I Googled it. Not true. The Explorer, or Cobra, or whatever it is, has a reverse rotation water pump that is a short mount, very close mount. It's, I don't know, 1 5/8 inch shorter pulley depth than the other ones. Is the only one that does not take a plate. It mates to that surface, and the impeller sits down inside, not on top. So this is the only one that doesn't have a plate. So I went and found a plate out of my stuff, and I looked at it, and I matched it up here. Don't turn them upside down. And look at that. That's not right. So this is a forward rotation. I'm going to label it. I'm going to get out and hang it back up on a nail. I'm going to keep looking. I have to find a reverse rotation that has ports that match this. Now, I did read that round ones can match if they're straight round and be okay. However, I could order one if I need to get a plate for this. The plates corrode pretty bad and get hard to clean up and seal anyway. So on my way down to the building to look for a plate, I started thinking, well, I've got these water pumps and I've got these covers off all these engines I've taken apart. Where is the plate? I'm missing a plate somewhere. And then I took a deep breath and I thought, and I realized there's where the plate is. That has a reverse rotation water pump 5.0 set up on a 351 Windsor with the plate that I had spare to go on the new Edelbrock pump that I bought, just like the one we're going to use. That's what I put on that car. That's why I'm going after doing this, because that setup works really good for me, especially when I'm not running a bunch of accessories or AC. We talked about this the other day. I really like this stuff. It's called the Right Stuff by Permatex. And I'm going to take some of this and I'm going to run me a bead on this surface for this cover. Then I'm going to use this little brush and I'm going to smooth it out with this brush. And then I'm going to put the gasket on to the other side as well. And that's going to fix it. Now there's my bead, and that's what they kind of suggest you're supposed to do. But I'm going to take this brush, I'm going to paint this bead down like I want and make it even prettier than this. And I think that's a step above that does a lot better job. Okay, what I have done here is I got this gasket prepped on both sides. And I put the timing cover on the engine on the dowels. Down here there's 2 dowels. If you don't have dowels in your block, you need to get them, because you won't line this up and your front seal will leak. Those dowels keep this centered so that the balancer goes into that seal that we talked about, greasing and having it centered. That's your front main seal that leaks if you don't get it centered. Dowels are crucial. Make sure you got dowels in your block when you do it. And I put in enough bolts from my bolt kit. I bought an ARP bolt kit, and I put in enough bolts that I could evenly hand tighten this down, because the gasket material that I use, the Right Stuff, sets up very, very quickly. You can also get a shorter setting up or a longer setting up, more patient one that will afford you more time to what you're doing. The quick one is really to put a gasket on without a gasket and get it on there and seal it and be done and get the thing back into service. I do like it because it has some hold to it. It's kind of thick and heavy, and I like that. Just down so it'll dry. I don't have a plate for my pump yet, so I'm going to pull these covers back off and I'll do the plate and the gasket set that goes between the pump and here later. But I use these bolts in this location and the pump to pull this down and get it seated to the block. It's sealed and seated for tonight, and that's good, and I'm going to leave that like it is. That's going to make a nice seal and do really good. If I want to, the next thing I can do is flip it over and put on my oil pan. You got to remember, on a Ford, your oil pan uses part of this cover. The cover goes on first, oil pan goes on second. We got through that pretty good on that cover. That started. Next thing we're going to do is a one-piece gasket for the oil pan. You're going to notice that this is kind of a different gasket than maybe what you've seen before. It's not the 2-piece cork and a rubber piece. This actually has metal laid in the center of it down these sides. Of course, these end pieces are rubber. But we're going to work on that next. And it's kind of a high-quality gasket. This one is not particularly expensive. Some gaskets will be very expensive, but I do like the ones that have metal in them. It keeps you from crushing them, keeps them from squishing out. It makes everything go much better, and I've had really good luck with them not leaking. This pan that we're going to use and we're going to reuse is going to need all the help it can get not to leak. It's not a really super duper pan, and it has some faults by design that we're going to try to overcome, see if we can't get by and stay within our budget that way without buying a real expensive pan like I had on the other motor we've seen here in the shop. Before we go, I'm going to leave you with just a little picture and a thought of something, and when we come back, and this is something we're not going to discuss on this engine build, but I'm going to show you a little bit, and I'm going to tell you just a very brief comment about it, but I want you to think about it. And it's very controversial, and I like to do it. It's my little OCD thing. It's something I just can't seem to get past. And I did it on this motor while we weren't filming, and we're going to proceed forward and just kind of pass over it real quickly because it's not part of the budget build, but it's something that I'm going to do, and we'll talk about it later.